Hello, how are you? Oh, how spooky is this? I'm Nick Hennegan. These are the Maverick Diaries, and the Maverick Diaries are based on a stream of consciousness diary that I wrote in 1997. And back then it was a bit of a pain, but making a new play I'd written called A Ghost of a Chance was a strange time for us. And summer 2020 has been a strange time for the whole world, so I thought I'd do these diaries. The full explanation is in episode 1 of these diaries, but as you may know from the written diaries, they become a bit of a pain. With these recorded diaries, I was supposed to do one every 2 days, and I haven't been able to. Oh, motorbike. And I'm outside now, so it's quite dark, and I've got some people stopping in my flat. It's all right, it's allowed, family people, so it's, lockdown rules, which are all about to change this weekend as well. Pubs are about to open. Cheers. It's not big and it's not clever, kids. And I would just like to say, once again, thank you very much for getting in touch. The reason I'm still doing these at episode whatever it is, 20 blur, is because of the lovely emails I've had and support. And if you'd like to be a follower, subscriber, please click the button below. Look at the shade on this. I'm using a phone light, otherwise you wouldn't see me at all. I'm outside in the garden. So I shall carry on with this anyway, as is the tradition. As I say, thank you very much for getting in touch. It is lovely to hear from you. I think I mentioned before we may have someone who's going to help us raise funds as a result of me doing this, which is just phenomenal. So, the last episode, you may remember, ended rather sadly with the death of Dougie Stone. If you want to know more, go back an episode, click the subscribe button, and I'll send you an update. So we move on. This is the fallout from our very first ever press conference, the first time we've got the press in one room to talk about my play. And we've got Paul Henry, who was well known as a television star in those days. And I'm going back to my memories of the Owens, Jean and Neville Owen, who were a family or a couple, an elderly couple who used to have parties at Mile Road in Hall Green in Birmingham every New Year's Eve. That was where Dougie Stone got me drunk the first time, and I told you about Dougie last time. So I go back now to talking about memories. This was in 1997. All that New Year Eve party stuff was still to come. While Dougie was still enjoying the New Year's Eve party at the Owens, and a full 12 months before he was to get me drunk by accident, I was standing outside their house while the party raged inside. New Year's Eve. I looked up at the sky. I remember it very well. It was a clear night and the stars looked beautiful. I was 13 years old, and I made a pledge with myself that I must do the same thing again, stand outside and look at the stars on New Year's Eve when I was 40 years old. God willing, I was still here. 40, that seems so remote. A whole lifetime away and full of infinite possibilities and excitement. The 40-year-old me should remember the 13-year-old me. Remember the boy I was now. I was fascinated at the thought of being so old. What would I be doing? Where would I be? I was really going to try and enjoy my life. I was looking forward to whatever fortune would throw at me. It was a good, clear, pure feeling. About 9 months later, fortune would throw an incident at me that sullied my pureness of this feeling somewhat for many years to come, but I don't feel I can say any more about that here. Some things are perhaps best forgotten. All I will say is that at 13 years old, I promised my 13-year-old self that on the New Year's Eve of my 40th year, I would try and remember how things were then, how I was feeling as a boy. It is rather spooky and purely coincidental that this play, A Ghost of a Chance, has prompted me to write this journal now. Had it not been for this journal, I may well have forgotten my 13-year-old pledge. The whole ghost process has been a nostalgia trip for me, a process of looking back and, on occasions, remembering the boy I was. So, I've got a date with myself this New Year's Eve. I'm 39 at the moment. Needless to say, none of these thoughts are going through my mind at the press reception at the Billsley pub in Birmingham. I've got my producer hat on, with all antenna working. I see a journalist has cornered Justin, so I go over and see how he's doing. He's doing fine, and his mom, Anthea, of course, is with him, so that's okay. I think the journalist is from one of the Solihull papers. I check that Danny Parr and John Slater are okay, and then I return to Paul Henry. Over in Paul's corner, things are starting to seem a little less rosy. As I arrive, I can hear Paul saying to one journalist, "Well, that's a personal thing. That's got nothing to do with the play. I'm here to talk about the show." I find out later, to my horror, that this particular journalist was asking Paul Henry about how the choices Bob has to make in the play, with Tim, his son, his stage son, compare to how Paul felt after his daughter was killed, and why he didn't work much after she died. I was shocked, but anyone could be so insensitive. Paul told me later that after his daughter was killed, it wasn't so much a case of could he go on working, but almost could he go on living. I hope I never have to cope with that sort of pain. Then another journalist talks about why Paul left his wife. I spoke to her this morning. Paul said he left his wife to come here, but one journalist won't let it go. "So, who's Paul living with now?" the journalist asks. "My wife," repeats Paul. Later, another journalist sidles up to me and says, "So when did Paul Henry leave his wife?" Bloody hell, what's this got to do with anything? He's still with his flipping wife. So I tell the journo he hasn't left his wife. Later on still, the wife-obsessed journalist corners John Slater and begins asking him about Sheila, Paul's wife by the way, why Paul is doing this part in this play, which we've already covered in the formal presentation, and how much we're paying him. "None of your bloody business, mate," says John Slater. No flies on John Boy. I see for the first time why people in the public eye get so sensitive about publicity. I also see what they mean by gutter tabloid journalism. It's got nothing to do with the work or the real story. The Daily Star runs a small piece the next day about how Paul Henry is so poor he has to work in a pub theatre production. What a load of rubbish. No mention of the play, other than to say that Paul plays a man even poorer than himself. Up until now, my image of the press has been very positive. The local press have been fantastic. They've helped the Maverick Pub Theatre concept immensely with coverage, articles and reviews. But I feel very sorry for poor Paul, even though I suppose he must be used to this sort of treatment. I also have a pang of worry for Rebecca, my girlfriend. If her BBC sitcom, in which she stars, is a success, she might attract this sort of attention. Although she's very sharp and clever, she's also quite shy, and I don't know if she'd cope with that sort of questioning, the sort of questioning Paul's just gone through. Still, let's cross that bridge when and if we come to it. After the journalists are finished, the photographers take over. Lots of photographs of Paul in the Billesley, and then they ask for Justin to pose with Paul. They shoot a load of pictures and ask if Paul and Justin can move outside. Better light. I decide that as defender of youth and named person on Justin's licence, I will attach a metaphorical lead to my young co-star and go with them. We traipse out to the front of the Billesley. First of all, there are a number of solo shots with Paul Henry, Justin and I, and we chat. "How do you think it's going?" he asks me. I look around to see who's listening. "I don't know," I whisper out of the corner of my mouth. "I've never done one of these before." I realise later that I should have probably asked Justin the same question. At 14 years old, he's probably had considerably more experience at this sort of press reception than I ever have. Then the photographers want to set up with both Paul and Justin, playing father and son. They have Justin sitting on Paul's feet, leaning on his shoulders, looking at him. I stand and watch like some proud parent. They look really good together. Although they don't really know each other at all, Justin seems enough of a professional actor to play the part well. I've not yet seen the results of the pictures, but on the photographer's instructions, Justin leans on Paul's shoulder and they look at each other, and I can see they look like they could be father and son. There's no frostiness or unfamiliarity. In fact, Justin looks at Paul almost lovingly. Seeing the two of them together for the first time like this, even though it's only for a photo shoot, I feel a small tremor of excitement. By the 8th of September, we will have had 1 month, including rehearsals, of Justin and Paul being together every day. An audience will have to believe that they are father and son, and although the prospect of starting proper rehearsals fills me with anxiety, I realise I'm looking forward to it. After the photo shoot, it's time to return to the pub for the final task of the afternoon, an interview with live TV. We all troop back upstairs, and then Justin and I troop back down again, as the reporter has decided she wants to talk to us outside as well. Because of his height, she crouches down by Justin. She says, "So, you're the Macaulay Culkin of the West Midlands then?" Justin smiles sweetly at her and then shoots me a glance. I don't know him that well, but I recognise the glance. We've spoken about the fact that he looks younger than he is, and this is a great asset to him as a performer. Mentally, though, he's a mature 14-year-old. But, ever the trooper, Justin does his bit, even though I notice a bit of bad microphone technique on the part of the television reporter. And she introduces him on camera as the Macaulay Culkin of the West Midlands. Then it's my turn. I do me bit and talk about how and why I wrote the play. I ought to tell you that here, shouldn't I, really? Maybe later. After I finish the interview, the reporter says, "Have you done this before?" "Yeah," I reply. "A bit." The TV crew interview Paul Henry in the corridor between the function room as the Billesley, and then Paul and I have to cod some false rehearsal-type shots, As we walk up and down the room with a bit of script in my hand trying to look intelligent, Paul starts quoting the script at me. He's learnt the first 10 or so pages. Bloomin' heck. So this is getting serious. We finished the final interview at about 3:30 in the afternoon, and I realise it's been quite a slog. John Slater, Justin and me return to the round room. Justin's looking for a drink, but the weakest thing left now is low-alcohol lager, and Angia, his mum, is quite rightly not going to let him have that. Anthea says they may come and see our play Up and Under tonight, but is there any bad language in it? Is there any bad language? There is. And half a rugby song. I explain that, yes, there is some bad language, but it's not gratuitous, and other children around Justin's age have also been to see it. Anthea says she'll discuss it with her husband. A bit of me thinks Justin might be exposed to bad language at school, and a whole lot more perhaps. He is, after all, 14, but I decide not to worry about it now. Anthea tells Justin she'll meet him downstairs. He seems quite relaxed and makes me and Slater laugh. He mimes drinking a bottle of wine and follows his mum out the door, staggering as if drunk. I think he'll be okay, will Justin.